Let's dive right in. I have opened up the photography agreement / release form, and I have all of my notes right here. So I'm just gonna keep referencing these because I have notes based on different things that we're gonna talk about here. So if I'm not looking at the camera, that's why. Okay, so I've made these templates pretty easy for you to use. It should be fairly simple that you can just put your logo right there, your phone number, your email, everything that you need to change or alter is in this bright yellow color. So it should be fairly simple just to run through it. We're not going to read word for word everything in the contract because a lot of it is very simple and very straightforward. But there are some specific things that I want to focus on today. So this is the agreement to collaborate. A little note here, this client contact information, you only need that if you do not have some sort of client management system. I'm going to show you how I do it in the next video, but this is important to get their information. But if you already have it, I would suggest not having it in there again because that's just a pain for them to have to refill out. It is important though to get their Instagram account so that you can tag the people you're taking pictures of if you decide to post on social media. And then here we go, the release form. So the release form is important. I put it in here into the contract so that they don't have to sign a release form and a contract. Like I don't want to have to send two documents. They don't want to have to open two documents. So I put it in the same place because it's easy, but also because when you do your sales call and they're like, okay, yeah, I want you to be my photographer. And you're like, great, I'm going to send you a contract, a big scary contract that you have to sign, and I'm also going to send you an invoice with the money you have to pay me. That's overwhelming. So instead I say, awesome. In fact, this is like word for word what I say. Okay, awesome. The next step is that I'm going to send you an invoice with the information we just talked about. So that they're like, yeah, I just agreed to this. It's fine. It's not going to be anything new. The invoice that we just talked about, and I'm going to send you a contract / release form. It's just an agreement based on what we've talked about, and then it gives me permission to post your pictures. So I say agreement instead of contract, and I say release form because they know what a release form is. They're not quite sure what the contract is. That sounds like they're going to sign away their soul or something like that. So saying release form isn't misleading because that is in this contract that I'm sending them, but it's a little bit less overwhelming, and it helps them understand what's going to happen. So that's what I say, and that's how I do it. Basically, this release form says that you have the right to use the pictures however you would like to use them. In advertising, in social media posts, you could print the picture and have it in your house if you wanted to be weird. That's not weird. I have pictures from my clients in my office. That's not too weird. That kind of thing. So you have the permission to use the photos however you'd like to. You could print it and put it on your business card. And then the copyright belongs to the client. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And then that you're not going to sell the photos to any company. You have to make sure you do that so you can't sell them as stock photos. And then it says that the intended use for this content is something good. Basically, you're not going to sell the pictures to some creepy person. And that's it. That's basically all you need to know and all the point for that release form. Okay, so let's just jump right in there to terms. This reservation, number one, this basically is saying that they need to pay you a retainer fee or a deposit, which basically just means what I just said. Okay, I'm going to send you an invoice and a release form, and then as soon as I get the release form signed and the deposit paid, then I can book your date. The reason for this is because a lot of girls will contact you and they'll be like, oh yeah, I think I want you as my photographer, but really they're shopping around. So if you book out your calendar with a bunch of girls who haven't paid you money yet, you're not going to be able to book a real bride who really does want to book you for that day. So I always require a deposit or a retainer fee in order to book the day. You can decide how much that will be. We're going to talk about cancellations in a little bit. I make sure that my deposit is non-refundable. So if they do cancel the wedding, and I, instead of making $2,000 that day for a wedding day, if they've canceled the wedding, at least I make $500 in the deposit that's non-refundable, something like that. So it kind of protects your business. And we're going to talk about protecting your business a lot. I don't mean at all to take advantage of my clients or anything, but this is my business. This is my livelihood. And every business has a contract like this because businesses need to make money, right? So it's okay that this is non-refundable, and it's okay if you decide to have your clients pay you 50% up front. That's okay. That's totally your decision to make based on your bills, what you need to make in order for it to be worth it for you to work for yourself, right? I'm all about that. Okay, number two, event schedule. Basically, they're going to keep you updated about what's going on. That is your responsibility as well to make sure you know exactly what's going on that day. It's very unlikely, even though it's in the contract, that the bride will follow through with that and let you know because she's busy. 3, changes. Any changes to the contract must be done in writing and agreed to by both parties. Exclusive photographer. Okay, this is important. We're going to focus on this for a second. So it says basically that you are the exclusive photographer, that the bride has not hired two photographers to shoot her wedding. Let's think about that for a second. If the bride hired two photographers, she's rich or she doesn't trust you. That's one of the two. And we should clarify really quickly, you have the right to bring second shooters or videographers. That confuses brides sometimes. They think that because of this, they're not allowed to hire a videographer. They totally can. This is talking about photography. If there's another photography on set, things get weird because then like who's in charge, who gets to get the best shots, who gets the priority spot for the angles, who's directing the photo shoot, like it just gets weird when there's two photographers. Usually the bride is not going to hire two professional photographers from two different businesses. What's more likely to happen is that she's going to say, hey, my Aunt Susie is going to be there with her camera and just taking pictures because she likes to take pictures, or my neighbor's going to be there or something like that. Here's the reason I have this in here. I love having other photographers there because I love photography. And when I started taking wedding pictures back before my business, like I would go to my friends' weddings with my camera and start taking pictures. That's how I got into it. So I totally support that. I love that. But here's the problem. If Aunt Susie has the type of personality that I fear and that I just dread, then she's going to try to get in your space. And this happens all the time to me. It used to happen all the time until I put this in my contract. Aunt Susie has great intentions and she wants to provide great pictures for the bride, and the bride wants to get extra bonus pictures that she doesn't have to pay for, right? Everyone has good intentions, but Aunt Susie knows the bride better than I do. So if Aunt Susie is up in my space, which is going to be difficult for me to manage Aunt Susie and the bride and groom, then the bride is going to look at Aunt Susie's camera and not mine. And then I'm not going to get the pictures that she hired me to take. So there have been times where Aunt Susie's gotten in my way or she's insisted in standing in the right spot, and then like I can't get the right picture, or I get the picture but then Aunt Susie jumps right in front of me and then she's in the picture as well. Like it just gets nutso. So that's the reason I've put it in here. Here's the thing. You shouldn't ever have to have this problem, because you should have developed enough trust and enough credibility with the bride before you get to this contract where the bride's like, I don't need Aunt Susie. I trust this photographer with everything I have. With $2,000, I trust this photographer. Like, you shouldn't even have to have this conversation. So I've put it in here just in case, but you should have developed enough relationship with the bride and built up enough confidence that the bride knows you can totally handle it. Yeah, that gets really messy. It's okay if for whatever reason you did your part and the bride still is like, oh, hey, my aunt's going to be there. This is word for word a conversation that happens with brides and photographers. I'm going to read this to you. See if you recognize these things. The bride says, I saw in your contract that you have to be the only photographer. My Aunt Susie's going to be there with her camera, and she said that she wants to take some pictures on the day of. Is that okay? And then I say, oh, that's nice of her. Is she a professional photographer? Not to be sassy, but like I do need to know if she's a professional photographer because, for example, if Aunt Susie is a professional and she has a business, why didn't the bride hire Aunt Susie? Is it because there's weird family drama I need to know about? Is it because Aunt Susie has a really old-fashioned style and the bride likes my style? Well, then I need to know for sure, just to make sure that I can make the bride happy, I need to know what the bride likes about my style. But also, if Susie is a professional, I don't want to, I need to be aware that I'm on her turf and I need to be very respectful of that, right? So it's not trying to be sassy, but it is also saying like, well, is Aunt Susie a professional photographer? Because if she's not, then like, remember, that's why you're hiring me. So I guess there's a little bit of sassiness in there. The bride says, no, she's not professional. She just likes photography. I say, the reason I have that in my contract is because I've shot some weddings where the neighbor has been there with their camera too. And I don't mind if they grab a few shots, not a big deal. But there have been a few times where they're in the place that I need to be or they're crowding up in our space. I just want to make sure that I can do exactly what you hired me to do. Every bride is going to get on board with that. They want you to do what they've hired you to do, right? And then she goes, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then I always follow up with this just to re-emphasize. I say, I would hate to miss the perfect moment because I tripped on your aunt or something like that. Ha 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 ha, and make that a joke. And then I say, so I totally don't mind if she brings her camera, but if she's in my space or if she's like making it difficult for me to do my job, I might ask her to back up a few steps. Is that okay? And then the bride will say, yeah, that's great. That's great. So that's how I overcome that objection. It has worked every time. Now, are there times where I still have this problem? Yes, absolutely. And there are times where Even for brides that where we don't even need to talk about this, I show up to the wedding and they have their cousin who shows up with a camera as well or something like that. Like it always still happens. And does that mean that I tell the photographer to back up every time? No. But usually in a very nice way, I go get to know the photographer and I kind of ask where they're at. I ask about their passion with photography. I see if they're actually a business or if they just like to take pictures, that kind of thing. I kind of feel it out. And then they always ask, how do you know the bride? And then I say, she found me through this way and then she hired me to be her photographer. And that kind of, in a very nice way, establishes the authority that you've been hired. And then usually after that point, you don't need to worry about them getting in your space. So, yeah, photography is an interesting thing in that way. No one would do that like with cakes. No one would bring an extra wedding cake to the wedding. Anyway, so hopefully that's not going to be too much of a problem for you. Hopefully you can avoid that by having this in your contract and knowing how to overcome those objections. Now, different conversation a little bit. If the bride insists on having 2 photographers, then the best way to go about that is to hire someone under you. So if she says, I want you to be the main photographer, but I want a second shooter because when I walk down the aisle, I want you to get a picture of his face and I want the other photographer to get a picture of me walking down the aisle, that kind of thing. For the record, I think one photographer can handle that just fine, but some brides really insist on having 2, which is not a big deal at all. So if that happens, instead of the bride choosing who the other photographer is, because that's just going to be this whole disaster we just talked about, instead of that happening, here's what I would recommend. You should say, fabulous, not a problem. I will hire a photographer under my business. I've done this before. Hopefully you have. If you haven't, don't say that, be honest. Say that you'll hire someone under your business to come and be your second shooter. And the reason for this is, and this is totally fine to tell her, you say, I want to choose and make sure that they have good quality photography, that it's the same style as mine because she chose you, so she likes your style, and that they are qualified to do what I need them to do on the wedding day. And she'll be like, great, you're taking care of this, perfect. So then you hire a second shooter that does all of those things, and then you have to edit their photos because you don't want your photos to look one way, very professional, she hired you like this. She pays money to get a second shooter, and then the photos look different because they edited them differently. Does that make sense? So you are going to have to take the photos that the second shooter takes and edit those as well, which is going to double your work. So most second shooters, at least in Utah, where I am, they charge about $50 an hour to be a second shooter. So I would suggest that you charge the bride $100 an hour because it does double your work. So you're going to have to charge extra, however you decide to charge that. And that's how you can have a second shooter. I would definitely suggest going about it that way because any other way is going to get complicated and it's going to get complicated. Okay, let's move on. I have so many double-sided papers here. I'm not sure what page I'm on. So this entire agreement, basically, we'll see this a few times. Basically, if anything changes, it needs to be in writing. Basically, this is, for the example I have from a few months ago, I was hired by a bride to do photography. Then a week later, she said, oh, wait, you do videography, right? And I go, no, I don't do videography, just photography. There's no video stuff in the contract. Sorry, but here's a bunch of recommendations for videographers. So that protects me because it's not in the contract. It's not something we agreed to. She can't expect me to provide more than what my business provides. Okay, let's talk about photo rights. If you are a photographer making money, even if you're not making money, you need to be aware of what you can and can't do with a photo, where you can take pictures, that kind of thing. So the quick version is if you're in a public place, you can take pictures of anything because people are out in the public, which therefore forfeits their right to privacy, basically. Technically, if you're at a reception venue or a ceremony for a wedding, probably those are on private property, but people expect photographers to be there, so therefore it becomes, in essence, a public place. That means that you can take pictures of people at a reception or a wedding and post it, and then you should be fine. Be careful about kids because people get weird about kid pictures being up on the internet, but technically you should be fine taking pictures at a wedding and posting those. Here's the kind of the difference that people use in court to decide whether it's public or private. The 2 reasons. 1, did the person have a reasonable expectation of privacy? For example, if they're in their house, they expect to have more privacy than they would expect to have in a public place. Second, how are the images being used? Are you using them to embarrass somebody? Are you celebrating a wedding? That kind of thing. So this gets a little bit complicated with that Marilyn Monroe picture, where she stands over the vent and then her dress flies up because technically she expected to have more privacy under her skirt than was taken in the picture, if that makes sense. So that gets a little bit sketchy. There's never quite a black and white line, but you should just be aware of that and be careful. Now, photo rights. The copyright definition of copyright ownership is 4 things. First, to reproduce the photo. Second, to make derivative works based on that photo, to distribute copies of the photo, and to display the photo publicly. So that's what you get when you have copyright ownership. Now, based on the law, the person who takes the picture, who actually presses the shutter release on the camera, owns the photo. Not the person who owns the camera, not the person who was in the photo, but the person who took the picture. That means that you own every photo that you take. Every photo, even wedding photos. Your clients don't own them at all. So there are 3 different ways that you can give photos to your clients, or give the copyright permissions to, or copyright rights, whatever you want to call it, to your clients. Here are the 3 ways. First, you could give them nada. You could give them nothing, or basically nothing, which would be like, you choose your top 5 pictures and then you print them on a canvas and then you give those canvases to the client. That would be the first option, where it's very, very controlled. You know that they can only use the pictures as a canvas on their wall because that's the only access they have to it. That's the first option. Second option is that you give them everything, which would be like handing over the raw, unedited images. They get to edit them, they get to crop them, they could put mustaches on them, they could put a green screen in the background and make it a beach picture instead of a wedding, whatever. You give them everything and they have the rights to all of it. The third thing is that you could give them access to some of the copyright. And that's what most photographers are doing right now. That's what I'm doing. And I'm going to walk you through exactly how I have that outlined in my contract so you can see what the client gets access to. So, number 1, 6.1, photographer grants to client all printing and distribution rights. That means they can post, they can print, they can do whatever. Client understands that photographer pictures are professionally retouched. And sorry guys, turning the pages. And then number 3, here at the bottom, the photographer grants the client all printing and distribution rights and permission to share the images on social networking websites with family and friends, on vendor websites, as long as the images remain unaltered and textual credit is explicitly given to the photographer. So those are my conditions. You can have all of the edited photos as long as you give me credit where you post them and let people know that I'm the one who took the photos. Thank you very much. And you can't edit the photos. So you can't put your own filter on it. You can't change the way it looks because I created art and it needs to stay consistent with the rest of the art that I produce. 6.4, although you are sensitive to marriage status, you retain the right to use the photos even if the client's divorce. This has happened. This is helpful for you because you could maybe have a picture on your website, somewhere in the depths of your website, and say your bride gets divorced, she could come after you and be like, I insist that you take that down, or maybe it's on your business cards or something like that. Of course, you want to be really, really sensitive to this. This is so important to be sensitive about, but you still have the right to use them. Now, I would not suggest posting these pictures or anything like that if the wedding is called off or the client's divorced, because that's rude, but you can use them in a way that would be tactful if you decided to do that. Okay, this is important. 6.5. This is the third option that I was talking about where you, or the third option? I can't remember which order I told you. I don't remember. But basically, this is saying that you give edited photos to the client. You don't give the raw, unedited, original images. Now, you can decide what you want to do here, but I would suggest not giving the unedited images. The reason for this is, well, first, if you are still mastering photography, your unedited images might not be that great. That might be rude of me to say, but you might be relying on editing to get an amazing image. And in that case, you definitely don't want to give the unedited images because that'll make you look less professional than you are. But more than that, for me, it's the fact that I don't think an unedited image is complete. For me, it's like a half-painted project. Like if I were a painter and I started painting and then somebody else could come in and finish painting the project, well, then it's not mine anymore. It's not something that someone's really hired me to do and create. It's like a collaboration with your cousin because your cousin can edit the pictures kind of thing. So I would not suggest doing that. A lot of brides will ask for the unedited images because they are afraid that you're going to delete a picture that they want or that they won't like the way you edit it or whatever. This comes back down to confidence again, that you need to build up your confidence or their confidence in you, the fact that they believe you can do the job they're hiring you to do. This is another conversation, almost word for word, for what brides say and how I overcome their objections here. The bride says, do I get the original images and the edited ones? I say, I don't deliver the original images. You will get the high resolution edited photos. Emphasis on high resolution so they feel like they're getting great quality. And the way I see it, if you hire me to document your wedding in a beautiful way, your neighbor could take pictures and give you unedited photos, but I can professionally retouch them and make them look amazing. Since we're talking, I know you like my style, and most of that style comes from the specialized way that I edit. That makes it sound fancy, because it is. You won't get that in an unedited image. Does that make sense? The bride says, some photographers are okay with giving the originals away. I think to myself, I don't know any professional photographers that do that for wedding clients. But I say, why is it important for you to have the originals? And then the bride comes up with whatever objection she actually has, because you keep asking why and getting down to the basis of it, and then you can overcome that objection. But I never give away my files. The bride either feels confident that I can do my job, we overcome her concerns, or if she really needs those photos, then I recommend her to a different photographer, because I'm not going to be the right fit for her in that case. So that's what I would suggest. Really quickly here, 6.6, re-editing. Here's the reality of this. You do not have time to re-edit everybody's photos. You don't have time to re-edit one person's photos. You have a job and you need to get paid for the time that you put in. Now, if you make a mistake, like they have a scar on their head and you said you'd edit it, but you didn't, then you need to go back and fix all those photos for free. If it's not your mistake and if it's just a preference thing, like, for example, 2 quick stories. First, there was this cute girl and she was a little bit chubbier and she had a shirt that didn't cover her belly button. And we kept pulling the shirt down in the photo shoot, but inevitably it kept popping back up. And so I did my best in editing to, crop it out and like make it good, but there were a handful of pictures where it still showed. And then she asked me to go in and re-edit and go into Photoshop and like rebuild in and paint in her shirt and all of this stuff, which I could have done, but it would have taken many, many hours. And it was busy season, so that means I wouldn't have had time with my family. I would have had to be working extra hours, so I needed to get paid for that. So that's the kind of case where I would put a re-edit fee on, or my other bride, super cute, I edited the photos based on what I thought was right for the setting and the lighting, and then she decided that she wanted something a little bit more moody and darker. So instead of making her pay the entire re-editing fee for the whole session, I suggested that she send me her top 5 photos. I would re-edit those top 5 for free. She could look at those. If she wanted those, I would send her the files, no big deal. But then if she wanted me to re-edit the entire session after that, then she'd have to pay the re-edit fee. She ended up loving the original, and so she just kept the original edit. So that's a way to go about it. I would suggest always saying yes, and here's how we can make that happen. And that doesn't mean you have to do it for free, but say yes to help the client out, and then put your price on it, basically saying, absolutely, I can help you with that, but because that is extra, more than what we agreed to, I'm going to have to get paid for my time, because that means I have to stay up late or I don't get to go hang out with my family tonight. So, okay, here we go. We're going to speed through this next section. Number 7.1, the photographer is not obligated to use the work. Basically, if for whatever reason you don't want to use the pictures on your Instagram feed, you don't have to. And a note on that, your Instagram is your sales tool. It's not a place where you throw a bunch of like the highlight picture from every photo shoot you do. It is a sales tool portfolio to attract the type of client that you want to have. And this sounds a little shallow, but if you take pictures of a client that doesn't look the way that your normal demographic does, like if this person doesn't look like the person you're trying to target, that could be very effective in your social media, but you might also decide that maybe their wedding colors are terrible or something. You don't have to post that in your feed if it's not going to attract the people that you want to sell to. So there's no reason for them to get upset about that. That's up to you. 7.2, the final production and editing will be left to the discretion of the photographer. That's great. And then 7.3 is that you don't have to deliver every image taken at the event, and how many images you deliver is left to you. So that means if you go and do an engagement shoot and then 5 minutes later a thunderstorm hits, you can deliver 15 pictures instead of your normal 75 because you didn't have a full shoot or something like that. That just covers you a little bit. Confidentiality, we don't need to really read through. This is mostly for the styled shoots, and we'll talk about that with the model contract. Okay, limitation of liability. Let's see here. Okay, basically, if a creeper third party uses the photos for something weird, you're not involved in it, so you can't get in trouble. And then also, it backs you up just in case your hard drive fails or your SD card is corrupted or something like that, if you lose the pictures, then they can't sue you. That sucks so bad. So have backups, have extra hard drives, all these things just in case that does happen, because that would be the worst. The worst. On that note, that makes me remember, I definitely suggest getting business insurance. It's not very expensive, just a few dollars a month, but it protects you if somebody trips over your tripod at a wedding or your camera equipment is broken or stolen or something like that. It's so worth it just to have business insurance. So I would suggest doing that. Indemnification. Okay, this means that they will compensate for harm or loss. That's like the official phrase for it. Basically, it's saying that if something happens, you don't have to pay the cost of defense. You don't have to pay the court costs. The client will pay the court costs if they decide to sue you or take you to court. So that's helpful because then you don't have to cough up a bunch of money right away to be able to take care of that. Discretion, be nice. Don't go telling everyone all the problems that your client has or vice versa. Payment, client agrees to do everything listed in the invoice. That's important. All payments made to photographers shall be made through this way. Definitely list that on here just so that it's listed. Of course, you'll end up talking about that with your client because they need to pay you, so you'll tell them how. But if it's in your contract, then it's way more likely to happen through that way. 12.3, this is an example of a late fee policy. Up to you. 12.4, don't have this in here if you charge per package. So if you do a flat fee for a photography package, then you should not say that you charge based on the hour and that everything you do is going to be charged, because that will confuse them. If you charge per hour instead of per project, then I would definitely put this in here, because if they text you all the time, if you're answering emails or doing extra research for them, you need to be paid for that time. 2.5, if the bride says, oh, I think we're going to do a sparkler exit, and you guys do sparkler exits, right? And you're like, yeah, I did sparkler exits. Then they're like, great, you provide the sparklers. And you say, well, yes, I could provide the sparklers, but you need to pay for the sparklers and a hassle fee for me to have to go to the store, find the sparklers, bring them, all of these things. So basically saying that anything that like prop wise or anything, the client is going to pay for. Shooting times, 2.6. Okay, this is basically saying that the photo shoot starts on time, the agreed time, and then ends at the agreed time. This gets tricky when people are late. I've had brides who are 30 to 45 minutes late. Like basically they show up at the time we're supposed to be ending the photo shoot. And there are 3 things you can do for this. You can start late. You can start half an hour late and still plan to shoot for about an hour or however long the shoot was. That only works sometimes, because sometimes the situation doesn't work like that. You could start half an hour late and then just shoot for another 30 minutes and then end on time, or you can reschedule. You're going to have to decide how to go about that. And I'm sure you've had this type of situation before and you just have to do whatever is best in that moment. I don't think that there's a yes or no or like a black and white answer for whatever is always best. I think what is best is what's best for the us, not for the client or for the photographer, but what's best for like the relationship. And that's always going to be different. Here's the thing though, you can't let your life be thrown off because somebody else's life is weird or for whatever reason, decisions that they made. You have a life, you have a babysitter watching your kids at home, you have a sunset that you have to time perfectly, you have other clients, like your time is valuable. So it's important to make good expectations before the shoot, like texting them the day before or texting them an hour before the shoot, that kind of thing, to say, okay, see you at 5:30, see you at 5:30. And if you clarify ahead of time by saying something like, we really need to start on time so that we can take pictures by the time sunset happens. Like we only have a certain amount of time that we need to be able to work with. If you talk about it in that way, something that benefits the bride, she's going to be way more likely to be on time. Now, if there was a traffic accident or their tire blew or something like that, that's not really their fault. So I wouldn't make them pay a rescheduling fee or anything like that. But if they're just late and you only have 15 minutes more to take pictures, then I would suggest rescheduling and having them pay you a fee, because now they're taking up 2 nights where you could have been with your family or you could have been making money with a different client. So up to you. Those are my thoughts. Okay, let's talk about the travel fee. Payment consists of photographer assigned fee plus state taxes. Okay, now let's talk about photography travel fees. If the client wants you to fly to a different state or drive 2 hours away or something like that, I think you should charge a travel fee unless you really need that in your portfolio. There's a time for all of that in your business. I always charge the travel fee up front. For example, if my client wants me to fly out to Wyoming and shoot the wedding, when they book me, they sign the contract, they pay the deposit, and they pay the travel fee, which will cover lodging, transportation, flights, food if I decide to do that. It's up to you, that kind of thing. I think that they need to pay that travel fee right away, because if they do cancel the wedding and I've already booked the tickets, then my fee is covered. Does that make sense? So that's how I would do it. I have put an example travel expense here. You can change that or keep it, whatever you prefer. 13 is responsibilities. The photographer is not responsible for compromised coverage due to causes beyond the control of the photographer. This is helpful because also, photographers are not held liable for missed coverage of any part of the event. This means you can go to the bathroom during the reception and you're allowed to do that. And they're not going to be mad that you're in the bathroom for 5 minutes. It also means that if grandma's in the corner doing the splits and you're on the other side getting pictures of the first dance, they can't be mad that you didn't get pictures of grandma because you were on this side of the room, right? It also is helpful if your equipment breaks. Then just don't let your equipment break. Always have backups. But if you do, or if something goes wrong, then it's not your responsibility to always be able to fix the problems. And 13.2, photographer is reserved, not hired for the hours agreed upon. So if the wedding ends early and everybody's leaving, then the wedding's over and your project is done. They don't expect you to stay for another 2 hours. Throughout the planning process, you should be aware of what time the wedding's going to end, like the whole plan for the day. And then throughout the reception, you should also be talking to the client and saying, awesome, we're on schedule. You're still planning to leave at 9:30, that kind of thing. Venue and location limitations. If you're not allowed to stand on the roof of the building, then you're not allowed to stand on the roof of the building. And even if your client asks you to, you're not going to, right? 14.2, client is responsible for acquiring all permits. If the venue that you're shooting at has a $250 photography fee, the client's going to pay that, not you, because that's not going to come out of your check. Termination. Either party may terminate the contract at any time. I'm just seeing if any of this needs to be clarified. Okay, 15.4. Until full payment has been made, photographer reserves the right to keep the work completed under its copyright because you own the photo until they pay and buy it, right? Enforcement waiver. Basically, things need to be written down. Okay, great. Miscellaneous. 17.1, photographer agrees to treat the client and vendors with respect. 17.2, cancellations. Okay, this is complicated. There are 2 different types of cancellations or rescheduling. One of them happens, okay, let's talk about rescheduling first. If they have booked you and paid the deposit and then they reschedule their wedding or postpone it for any reason, I've had brides do this because they're having a surgery. I've had brides do this because they haven't gotten their visas or whatever. If it's rescheduled, there are 2 things that could happen. First, you could be available on the day that they reschedule too. If this happens, I think that you should charge a rescheduling fee. Mine is 10% of the total cost. This is because now instead of taking up 1 day, they're taking up 2 days. And you could have booked a $2,000 wedding on both of those days. Instead, now you're just booking a $2,000 wedding here. And then on this day, you get to have the 10% of that. At least you're making something, right? That's what I do if I'm available to reschedule with them. If I'm not available to reschedule, I am not responsible to find a replacement photographer for them. Of course, I will do everything I can to help, but I'm not responsible to find someone else for them. At that point, I'm going to give them all of the work that I've completed, that they have paid for, and then we call it quits. We write it down officially because in the contract it says it has to be written. So we do an official email or something like that, and that says, thank you for having me be your photographer up to this point. I've loved working with you. I'm done now. Here are my suggestions and recommendations for the rest of your photographers. Yep, that's what I would do. If the event is canceled after they have given you a deposit, there's not going to be a fee because I'm not a jerk. Like if they're canceling their wedding, already people are sad and upset and it's disappointing. So I'm not going to make them pay me the rest of whatever. I do want to be paid up for the work that I have completed up until that point. And this should be taken care of in your payment plan. You should either have your deposit cover the first shoot. Like if you're doing their engagements, their bridal, and their wedding day, your deposit should be enough to cover up until the wedding day. Because what if they cancel after bridals, right? You need to have been paid for that. Here's an example. I had a client, a cute bride and groom. They were engaged. They booked me. They gave me a, I honestly don't remember the numbers, but I'll just make this up. I think that they gave me a $500 deposit. I don't remember. We're making it all up. Say they gave me $500 deposit. or no, let's make this easier, a $100 deposit. And then we did the engagement photo session. And at that point I charged, say, $300 for the engagement session. So they had paid $500 up until that point, and $100 of it was non-refundable. And then they called off the wedding. So I had $500 and $100 was non-refundable, and I had only done $300 of work. So there's $100 left over. So I refunded $100 to them, and then I kept the $400. That makes sense. I made all of that math up on the spot for this example, but I think that all made sense. $400, yeah. So that's how I would handle that type of situation. You need to be paid for the work that you've accomplished, but you want to make it as easy for them as possible. Okay, here's the thing. If you have to cancel for any reason, you are not responsible for finding a replacement. Hopefully you can be nice to the people, but you have the right to cancel at any time. And then, of course, you would give back any photos that you've taken of them and that kind of thing. Okay, let's skip through some of these things here. Oh, really quickly, while we're talking about cancellations, it's important to have a non-refundable deposit or retainer fee for a handful of reasons. One of them is that I've had a handful of brides that have paid their deposit and then they've just gone MIA. They've ghosted me. I'm assuming that's because the wedding has been canceled. I do my best to reach out to them for months and months and months. I text them, I call them, I send them emails, everything. Facebook stalk them, message them there, and then they just never respond. So at that point, I assume that they have canceled the wedding. Other people are asking me to book that day. And I need to be able to book more clients on that day. And if I haven't heard back in 3 months, then I send an email and I say, I've tried to contact you many times. Other people want to book me on this day. I'm going to cancel as your photographer. I am going to keep the deposit because that's what we agreed to. And let me know if there's been a mistake or something. But I'm canceling as your photographer. That is the only time that I've ever canceled on a bride. And you're protected in order to do that if you need to do that. Okay, I'm looking at my notes. I don't think that we really need to go through anything else on this. You're like, hallelujah, right? I know that this is boring. Stick with me. 17.6, everything needs to be via email. That's my preference because it helps keep things organized for me, and it keeps it official, keeps it written down. And 17.8 is important. Due to space, the original files will be discarded after edited files have been delivered. Photographer is not responsible for storing original or edited files after delivering to the client. This is important in case your backups fail, or if they come back a year later and they're like, hey, can you re-edit this? Or even 2 weeks later, you can be like, sorry, I don't have the original files anymore, that kind of thing. I mean, hopefully you can accommodate what they need, but just in case you can't, that's how you would handle that. Okay, so let's look at these other contracts really quickly. That's everything you need to know about photography. The rest of these have a lot of those same paragraphs, basically copied and pasted. We're going to look at the model contract in just a second. First, let's look at the boudoir contract. Okay, boudoir contract is basically the same because it's a client hiring you to take their pictures. The difference here is that the privacy part of this is different. Boudoir, in case you're not totally positive what that is, basically it's when the girl, or I guess the guy could do this too, but usually it's the girl, gets dressed up in lingerie and takes some really pretty Victoria's Secret sexy pictures. I have this cute client who is getting married, and then a few weeks later her husband gets deployed. So she wants to take some of these pictures and send him some cute sexy pictures while he's gone. So this type of thing is very sensitive and vulnerable, of course. So we want to be really careful that the client has confidence that you are going to take care of them and keep their pictures private. So that's what we're looking at right here. Copyright belongs to client. That's again to distribute, that kind of thing, because it clarifies that later in the contract. I still have the right to use them, but I'm being nice and I'm not going to, right? The photos will be kept private, so that clarifies that I'm not going to post them. Photos will not be sold or used by any other company. Photos will not be posted or used for advertising purposes except with permission from the client. So I've had some boudoir clients who sign this and say, totally private, absolutely not going to use. And then we end up with a photo that doesn't show anything personal about them. For example, there's a picture I took where it's like a picture from here to here, and it's just her shoulder with her ring. No, it doesn't even have her ring because that would identify it as her. It was just her hand on her shoulder. It could have been anybody, and it was perfect for an ad that I was running. So I asked the client in an email, is it okay with you if I use this in an ad and I won't say it that it's you, all of these things. And she said yes. So in that case, again, anything written then adds to the contract and is counted as a legal addition to the contract. So that worked because it was in an email and because she gave me permission. But other than that, I never post my boudoir photos unless I get express permission from the client. So that makes them feel better, and it makes you feel better knowing what you can and can't do. So that's really the only difference with the boudoir contract. It's worth having a separate contract just to make sure that that is clarified and that they feel good about it. Okay, and then right here, let's talk about the model contract. This is going to be if you are doing a styled shoot. And just a little note on that, I have a training on how to do styled shoots from start to finish, and how to be strategic about them, why they're beneficial, how to communicate with all of the vendors involved. Like, I give you all my templates for my shoot briefs and my communications and what to tell the model to wear and all of these things. If you want that information, I will link it down below so you can get that. But that's the type of situation in which I would use this model contract. So if you're gathering a bunch of people together doing a styled shoot, the model is going to need to sign a release form, and then also sign and give you their information about like their sizing and stuff like that. So that's what's here in this contract. Okay, so this is the model contract. Again, you just copy and paste all of your information. You get their contact info, you get their sizing, body shape, and what they're comfortable wearing, if they have tattoos and piercings that you need to know about for your shoot. And then here it goes through the purpose of the shoot. For example, if you're taking pictures of a boutique. Oh, I just remembered something I skipped over. Okay, in the photography contract, we talked about photo rights. The person who takes the picture gets the right, unless, and this is the weird thing, it's called work for hire, I think is the official term. If a boutique, like a clothing boutique, hires you to take pictures of their stuff, then they get the right to the pictures because you're just doing a job for them, but they've hired you to do that. I hope that makes sense. So other than that, you always get the right to the pictures. So this is clarifying for the model because in a similar way, they want to know if they get the rights and all of this stuff. You tell them the purpose. Is it just a styled shoot to build up your portfolio, or is it a shoot to show off a certain type of product, that kind of thing? You go through, put the address, the start time, all these things, agreed that some sort of reimbursement or fee is paid to the model. You can clarify that if you want to pay them, whatever. The model will provide their own transportation, okay, and then photo rights. Your business retains the right to use the photos for business and any other use that you want to use them for. Model will not have rights to the finished digital files. That's what I have in my contract. You can do whatever you want. I think you should retain the rights to it if it gets weird if it's you being hired by some other boutique or something. But if you're doing this as a styled shoot to build your portfolio or to get Instagram strategy going, then you should have the right to the photo. The model will not have rights. And that means she can't alter the images in any way, but you should send her the pictures at the end. The rule in the modeling photography combo world is that if you pay the model, she doesn't need to get access to the photos. But if she's doing it for free or trade for pictures, then she needs to get the pictures. It's a trade situation. So that is covered right here. Trying to see if there's anything else in here. Model does not have a choice which images are used. That's important. And then this is where confidentiality comes in, because if you're doing a styled shoot with, and say like you have the secret weapon or the secret sauce to make the shoot amazing, that needs to be confidential. Like, you don't want your model to go model for your competitor and tell them all the things that you're doing. So you'll need to clarify that so the model knows what is confidential, but that's in there. And then last thing in this one that is different, 5.2, your business has entered into a contract to shoot content for whatever, if that's the case. Even if it's not, you can tweak that to be correct. Your business is hiring the model to participate in the photo assignment. Because of time sensitivity and logistics of photo shoot, if the model cancels for any reason, your business has the right to pursue legal action. Now, will you pursue legal action? Probably not. But I put this in my contract when I went to Ireland and I was trying to find models to model American wedding dresses that I was bringing over. And everybody was canceling on me. They were being really flaky. So I clarified with the models before they signed this that if they canceled or didn't show up, that they'd have to reimburse me for the cost of the shoot, because without the model, I can't do the shoot. So that helped the people who were actually serious about it and who would be reliable actually sign the contract. Have I ever done this in person? Like, have I ever actually made someone pay me? No. But the time might come in the future if it's an important shoot where I might need them to reimburse me for something. So, yep, they will arrive on time and prepared. And then right here, it tells them how to take their measurements so that they can measure correctly, so you know which dress to put them in and what to dress them in. Okay, cool. And then this I item rental contract. Basically says, we don't even need to open it because it's so simple. Basically, this is for a styled shoot. If you are going to borrow a dress or a suit or what else would you borrow for a shoot? All kinds of stuff. If you're borrowing an item from a vendor to use in your shoot, most of the time vendors are familiar with how this works and the fact that they get the pictures back and that kind of thing. Usually it's not a big deal, but there are some vendors who get nervous about this because they haven't been involved in it, or maybe their expensive products are really hard to replace or something like that. So this contract says most of the same things we've looked at, but the difference is it has a section where you can write in the item number. So you can say, I'm taking this specific ring and or this specific, what else would you take? Now I don't know, hot air balloon. I don't know what's going to be in your photo shoots, but you can write down that specific thing. They get to keep a copy, you keep a copy, and it's a written agreement that you have their product. Basically, you're renting their product and that you'll bring it back on the time that you agree to.